Story 59, The Price of Indifference. I, 48 male, met Sarah, 47 female, during our sophomore year of college. I guess I would describe her as vibrant, ambitious, and with an infectious laugh that could light up a room. We dated for 3 years before getting married in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. The first 20 years of our marriage were everything I could have hoped for. We built careers, traveled, and created a comfortable life together. Sarah worked her way up to become a senior executive at a marketing firm while I established myself as an architectural engineer. We were that couple that others looked up to, the ones who seemed to have it all figured out. 2 kids, both now in college, a house that was almost paid off, and enough disposable income to enjoy life's little luxuries. The change happened gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. Around our 20th anniversary, Sarah began working longer hours, often coming home exhausted. Initially, I attributed it to work stress and tried to be understanding. But as weeks turned into months, I noticed a pattern emerging. Any attempt at physical intimacy was met with excuses. She was too tired, had an early meeting, wasn't feeling well, or a flat out, not tonight. It was weird to be in a situation where I needed to talk to my wife about our lack of a sex life. I tried talking to her about it multiple times, but she would either dismiss my concerns or become defensive. This drove me to start wondering if it was me. Had I let myself go to the point where she was disgusted with me? I can't even explain the mental rabbit hole I went down with her rejections. Our sex life was non-existent. The part that made me doubt myself was the fact that her favorite toy was getting regular use, as there were times she would be in the bathroom with the door locked, not realizing the sound of the vibrator was still audible. I wasn't in a good place mentally at this point, so I started taking care of myself physically, signing up for a personal trainer, and making huge changes to my diet. Looking back on it, I know it wasn't me letting myself go, but that didn't matter to me at the time. I was in this sort of do-something mode. For almost 6 months, I was doing everything I could to make myself more attractive to her. I would even say that I was in the best shape of my life. Along with losing 20 pounds, I had gained a lot more muscle than before, going from a normal mid-40s guy to a much more athletic appearance. I really felt that I was doing everything I could to make myself as attractive to her as possible. I was in great shape. I started changing my wardrobe to be more into what my wife liked. I even cut my hair the way my wife had always tried to convince me to adopt. Sarah seemed happy about the change to my lifestyle, and I was hopeful that it might rekindle some of the spark we seemed to have lost. Unfortunately, even though Sarah was complimentary of my new look, we were still in a dead bedroom. Anytime I'd try to initiate any physical intimacy with her, I'd get denied with comments like, "Is that all you think about?" As if my desire for a connection with my wife somehow made me shallow or creepy. The breaking point came during what should have been a romantic weekend getaway for our 21st anniversary. I had planned everything meticulously, a luxury resort in wine country, dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants, and activities we both enjoyed. On the second night, after a wonderful dinner, I tried to initiate intimacy back in our suite. Sarah pushed me away with an exasperated sigh. "I think we're past all that," she said matter-of-factly, as if announcing we were out of coffee. "I'm just not interested anymore. You'll have to deal with it." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process her words. "Past all that? I'm 48, not 88. Are you seriously suggesting we just stop having sex?" "Well, it's not like it's that important," she replied, scrolling through her phone. "We have a great life together. Why does everything have to revolve around sex?" That moment crystallized something for me. It wasn't just about physical intimacy, it was about her complete dismissal of my feelings and needs. She hadn't even attempted to have a real conversation about it. There was no discussion of underlying issues, no suggestion of counseling, just a unilateral decision that affected both our lives. I told her flat out that it was important to me and I wasn't prepared to live a life of no physical intimacy. She just gave me a dismissive look and started to walk away. I stopped her in her tracks when I told her that I would not be celibate for the rest of my life. Her response was a dismissive whatever, then she turned and walked away from the conversation. The next few months were a blur of internal marital struggles. I loved Sarah, but I couldn't imagine spending the next 30 or 40 years in a marriage that had become more like roommates. I tried everything I could think of, suggesting marriage counseling, planning date nights, and even recommending that she see a doctor together to rule out any medical issues. Sarah rejected every attempt, treating my concerns as an annoyance rather than a legitimate problem in our marriage. It was during a business trip to Chicago that everything changed. I met Elena, 40 female, at a conference. She was divorced, successful, and remarkably easy to talk to. I guess I don't have to mention she was gorgeous. What started as a casual conversation over coffee turned into dinner, and before I knew it, we saw each other regularly whenever business brought either of us to the other's city. Elena understood me in a way Sarah hadn't in years. She listened when I talked about my feelings, shared her own experiences, and made me feel valued. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I made the decision to step out of my marriage. Yes, there was physical intimacy, but it was more than that, it was the emotional connection I'd been missing. I wasn't in love with her, but we were able to fill a void in our lives. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I made the decision not to end it. For the first time in years, I felt alive again. The guilt was there, but it was overshadowed by the realization of just how lonely and abandoned I'd been in my own marriage. The truth came out, as it always does. Sarah found the text exchanges between Elena and me while using my iPad. I came home from work to find her sitting at our kitchen table, my iPad in front of her, her face a mask of anger and sadness by the tears in her eyes. She demanded to know, "How could you do this?" in a trembling voice. I sat down across from her, feeling strangely calm. "How could I do this? You decided for me. How could you unilaterally decide that physical intimacy wasn't important in our marriage without even discussing it with me?" "So this is my fault?" she asked incredulously. "No, the affair is my responsibility," I admitted. "I should have handled things differently. But the breakdown of our marriage? That's on you. You checked out long before I did, Sarah. You just did it differently, and you know that. I even told you that I wasn't going to live in a sexless marriage, and you blew me off." This was followed by hours of painful conversation. Sarah alternated between anger, tears, and bargaining. She promised things would be different, that she would try harder, and that we could work on our intimacy issues. The part that hurt me the most in a bizarre way was that my wife was only interested in me after she had pushed me away into the arms of another woman. As I sat there listening to her promises, I realized something: I didn't want to try anymore. I realized that the relationship was broken, and I didn't feel it was worth the effort to try and fix it. Where was this willingness to work on things when I brought up my concerns? I asked quietly. Why did it take me finding a connection elsewhere for you to take my feelings seriously? She sat there with tears running down her cheeks, unable to answer me. Angry, I even told her that I knew it wasn't her sex drive since she'd nearly worn out her secret vibrator over the last year. She got this shocked look on her face and was about to deny it when I just shook my head and said, "I can hear you using it in the bathroom." I got up and walked to the bedroom because I was angry. Yeah, some of it was because of Sarah's attitude, and some of it was at me and the embarrassment of our situation. I walked into the bedroom, opened her nightstand, dug out her toy, and then walked back into the kitchen, throwing it into the garbage while her eyes were wide and shocked. That ended the conversation from my side as I just walked into the office and shut the door. Sarah stayed with her sister and her family that night. The next few weeks were tense, with her making obvious attempts to reconnect. She started dressing up for dinner, suggesting date nights, and trying to initiate physical contact. But something had fundamentally changed for me. Every time she touched me, I couldn't help but think about how callously she had dismissed my needs for the past 2 years. How could I even accept her advances when I knew they were calculated and not coming from her heart? I started sleeping in my home office to avoid the awkward dance of having to reject her. The irony wasn't lost on me, since I was now the one pulling away. But it wasn't out of spite or revenge. I had emotionally checked out of the marriage to the point where I had to admit I was no longer in love with my wife. Our kids noticed the tension during their spring break visit. Emily, our daughter, pulled me aside one evening and asked what was wrong. I gave her a sanitized version of events, initially leaving out the affair but explaining that sometimes people grow apart. She hugged me tightly and said she just wanted both her parents to be happy. Eventually, I convinced my wife to sit down with the kids, and we opened up about everything. They were mad at me for my transgression, but my daughter also took my wife to task for how she drove me away. Sarah suggested marriage counseling, the very thing she'd rejected when I proposed it earlier. I agreed to go more out of a sense of obligation to our 20 years together than any real hope of reconciliation. The counselor was a kind woman in her 60s who listened patiently as we both shared our perspectives. At the end of one of the sessions, she commented that there was a fundamental breakdown in communication and empathy. She said, "Sarah made a significant decision about your shared intimacy without considering its impact on me." Then she looked at me and said I responded by seeking connection elsewhere instead of forcing the issue to a head. She also said that I had to have known Sarah would find out and felt that deep down I was looking to punish her. She was right, of course. I didn't care if Sarah found out or not, so I didn't bother to try and hide anything. But knowing where we went wrong didn't automatically fix things. During one particularly emotional session, Sarah broke down and admitted she had taken me for granted, assuming I would accept whatever she decided was best for our marriage. I didn't realize what I was throwing away, she sobbed. I thought everything else we had was enough. She said she didn't understand that by dismissing my needs, she was dismissing me as a person. I'm not sure I would have chosen that wording, but I wasn't going to argue the point. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. But I think we both know it's too late. The trust is gone, and not just because of my affair. You dismissed me when I came to you as your husband. You treated my feelings as an inconvenience. I told her she would never trust that I wasn't looking for another partner and that I'd never trust that she wouldn't just go back to her old ways once she was comfortable again. As you can imagine, Sarah was distraught, and I almost gave in to seeing the anguish in her eyes. I don't know why I didn't, other than I just didn't feel the love I had for her before. Sarah's mother called me a few weeks later, pleading with me to give her daughter another chance. I listened patiently before asking, telling her that the divide between us was just too big. Sarah rejected me for nearly a year, even after I explained to her that I was unwilling to live in that situation. I asked her if that was a healthy relationship. I told her our problems were deeper than a simple "let's try to fix this." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. We divorced and sold the house 6 months later. Sarah moved into a luxury apartment closer to her office, and I found a smaller place near a lake outside of town where I'd always wanted to live. We're civil with each other and still co-parent and do family holiday events together. Almost a year later, I ran into Sarah at our favorite coffee shop. She looked good but still seemed sad. We were making small talk about the kids and work before she asked if I was happy. I told her that I was getting there, then asked, "Are you?" She gave me a sad smile and said she was learning from her mistakes. Then she said she just wished she hadn't had to lose me to understand what she did. This was the catalyst for the first open and honest discussion we've had in years. We talked about how different things might have been if we had both understood earlier that marriage isn't just about love. I admit that Sarah and I both failed our marriage in different ways. Her failure was dismissing my needs and feelings, treating them as inconvenient or unimportant, and then doubling down when I tried to talk to her about how they affected me. Mine was in seeking solace elsewhere instead of forcing us to either fix things or end them cleanly. But in the end, maybe some lessons can only be learned the hard way. We had a very good day, and we're talking again. Really talking. What does that mean? I don't know yet. The hardest lessons seem to come from the mistakes we make in the relationships we thought would last forever. The kids are coming to visit me at my place. I contacted Sarah and asked her if she wanted to come, and she accepted without hesitation. I'm not trying to say I want her back as my wife because, quite honestly, I've finally reached a point in my life where I'm happy. I love my new home, and I'm still dipping my toes in the dating scene. I was pleasantly surprised that there are a lot of amazing women out there for a guy my age. Obviously the kids are hoping there's a future for us.
I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.